Hello, grade 11 students. In this video, we're going to talk about the localization of the gene. Before we start, let's have some notes about this idea. How to verify that the allele of the disease is recessive? Simply, if you have to verify this, you have to look for two normal parents. They have an affected child. If you have two normal parents, and they have the affected child, meaning that the allele of the disease, it was masked in the parents. So it's recessive with respect to the normal dominant allele. Or if you want to verify an affected dominant allele, meaning that the allele of the disease is dominant, what do? You have to look for two affected parents. They have a normal child. Let's talk here about the location of a gene. The gene, maybe it's located on the autosomes. Autosomes meaning that from chromosome number 1, pair number 1 to pair number 22, where two alleles for the female and two alleles for the male. Why I'm talking about this? Let's check. If it's found on the non-homologous part of Y is found only in the male, so we don't have it in the female. While if it's found on the non-homologous part of X, in the male we have XY, so we have only one, while in the female we have two X's, so we have it as 2. However, if it's found on the homologous part of X and Y, so two alleles for the male and two alleles for the female, it can be an X and Y at the same time. So here, the three, they are called the gonosomal. So here, autosomal, chromosome pair number 1 to chromosome pair number 22. If it's found on the non-homologous part of Y, meaning that's found only in the male, homologous parts of X, meaning that's found in both male and females. In female we have XX, so we have two alleles. In the male we have XY, so we have only one copy. Homologous part of X and Y, we have two alleles for the male and two alleles for the female. So let's continue to talk about this. To verify that the disease or the gene is found on the autosome, meaning that it's autosomal. So all the males and the females should have equal property and equal probability to be affected by the disease. If the gene is located on the non-homologous part of Y, what does this mean? This means that only males will be affected, since females, what do they have? They have XX. So to verify it, you should look to the pedigree, and you should have all the females, they are normal, while only males should be affected. So the gene of the disease is going to be located on the non-homologous part of Y. This is the first way. Or the second way, every affected son should have an affected father. Why? Because if the disease is found on the non-homologous part of Y, so this means that, let's say the disease allele, it's D small. So the male would have XYD. So we're going to write it like this, XY, and you have to put the allele as a power, for example. So this X and YD, this person is affected since it consists of one copy and it's found on the non-homologous part of Y. So this YD should be inherited from where? From the father. So if we have it YD, this should be inherited from the father, and the father should be affected. This is another case to prove this. If the gene is located on the non-homologous part of X, so every affected daughter should have an affected father. Let's see, daughter has XD. So this XD this daughter should inherit XD from each of her parent. So XD from the father and XD from the mother. So the father exactly should be XDY. So since it's located on the non-homologous part of Y. So every affected daughter should have an affected father. If it's not like this, so it's not the case. But if we have affected daughter that has an affected father, so it's located on the non-homologous part of X. To verify if the disease gene is located on the non-homologous part of X, the recessive daughter and the recessive son should have a recessive father as well. Let's have this pedigree. In this pedigree, we have the disease. Sure, the one in dark, in the blue, for example, is the affected individuals, and the white, they are the normal individuals. So they said, discuss logically the chromosomal location of the gene, whether it's located in the X or in the Y. Before we start with this, we have to determine whether the allele is dominant and recessive. So here, logical discussion for the chromosomal location of the gene. If I told you like this, you have to prove, first of all, if the allele of the disease is dominant or recessive. Second, you have to designate by symbols. Third, you have to go for the verification. We have 4 cases. We have the non-homologous region of X, the non-homologous region of Y, homologous region of X and Y, and the autosomal. So in order to go for this, you have to deny 3 of these to get the 4th, and the 4th will be the correct one. So here, parents 1-1 and 1-2, they are normal, but they gave birth to affected individual 2-1 and 2-2. So the allele coding for the disease, it is recessive, and it's masked in the parents. It's recessive with respect to the normal dominant allele. So let's give N capital for the normal and D small for the diseased individual. Okay, so first of all, if the gene of the disease is located on the non-homologous region of Y, let's deny this. If it's found in the Y, none of the females or none of the girls should be affected. So here we have 2-2 is affected, so it's not the case. Or you can say every affected daughter, which is here 2-2, should have an affected father, which is 1-1, but it's not the case. So here we denied the first case. So here we denied that's found in the non-homologous part of Y. Let's move to the non-homologous part of X. Every affected daughter should have an affected father. Here it should be, for example, XD, XD, let's say, for the disease. If XD, it should inherit XD from the father, but the father here is normal, so it's not the case. From here, if it's found in the non-homologous region of X and Y, so this son, 2-2, should have XD, for example, YD. Okay? And this daughter also should have XD. So they should inherit XD. The daughter should inherit XD from the father, XD from the mother. And this one should inherit YD from the father and should inherit the XD from the daughter, for example, from the mother. So both of them should be father 1 and his wife should be affected. So, but it's not the case. They seem normal. So it's not the case. So here, it's not located in the X, neither on the Y, neither on the X and Y. So it's autosomal. So autosomal, we don't write it over the X or over the Y. So autosomal, we write it normally as letters. So this, since parents 1 and 2, they are normal, and they gave birth to affected children to 1 and 2, then the allele coding for the disease is recessive with respect to the normal dominant allele. Let N capital be the symbol of the normal dominant allele over the recessive allele of the disease, and let D small be the symbol of the allele coding for the disease, which is recessive with respect to the normal dominant allele. If the gene of the disease is located, do you realize there, first I started with dominant and recessive, then I gave the symbol. Third, I'm going to move to the verification. If the gene is located in the non-homologous part of Y, then none of the girls should be affected. But 2-2 is affected, so it's not the case. So none of the girls should be affected, and you have to go for the pedigree. You don't have to be in general, you have to be specific in the pedigree, so it's not the case. Or you can say every affected son should have an affected father, but son 2 is affected, should have XYD, should receive YD from the father, who should also be affected, but it's not the case. So here we deny it on the Y. For the X, if the gene of the disease is located on the non-homologous part of X, so every affected daughter should have an affected father, but female 2-2 is affected should receive XD from her father 1-1, who should be affected but is normal, so it's not the case. If it's located on the homologous parts of X and Y, then affected son 2-1, it should have XD-YD, should receive YD from his father, and affected daughter 2-2, XD-XD should receive XD also from her father. The father should be XD-YD and should be affected, but he is normal, so it's not the case. Therefore, the disease or the gene of the disease, it's on the autosomes, it's autosomal. Specify the genotype of the members of the family. Specify. What do we have to do? We have to justify. So 1-1 and 2-1 and 2-2, they are affected. So DD, since the disease is recessive, the allele is recessive with respect to the normal and should be expressed only in the case of homozygous or the pure state only. 1-1 and 1-2, they are normal, but they gave birth to affected individuals, so they should carry the allele, but it's masked by the normal dominant allele. 2-3 and 2-4, either they are an N or an D. I can't know this. An N or an D, since they are normal and they have hybrid parents, whether the allele expressed both homozygous and heterozygous. Moving to this pedigree. This pedigree is talking about the members of the family that are affected by a specific disease, where the blue they are affected and the white they are normal. They said indicate the dominant and the recessive alleles, and part 2 they said discuss the localization of the gene of the disease and give the genotypes of the couples 5, 6 and their children. Let's start first with the dominant and recessive allele. Which allele is dominant? Both couples, 1 and 2. Here you don't need to have 1-1 and 1-2, only they are numbers. So 1 and 2 they are affected and they have normal children 4. So the gene of disease is dominant over the normal gene. So here we give the gene of the disease is dominant. So give it, for example, D capital or affected A capital as you want. Since 1 and 2 they are affected and they gave birth to normal. So here it's dominant. Let's move to the localization. If it's located on the Y, none of the girls should be affected. But we have the 2 is affected, for example, or 10 is affected, so it's not the case. If the gene is located on the non-homologous part of X, every affected daughter every normal daughter should have normal father, but or every affected daughter should have an affected father. So here we have daughter 4, she's normal. She's normal, so it should be XN, for example. If you take the N small for the normal, so it should receive XN from her father and XN from her mother. So the father should be X and Y and should be normal, but from the pedigree it's affected, so it's not the case. Here we can move it to say that the gene is autosomal. So here we indicate the dominant and recessive. We discuss the chromosomal location of the gene. We're going to give the phenotype, and here the gene is autosomal. So then they move to talk about genotypes of the members 5 and 6 and their children. So we gave A for the disease and N for the normal. So A and Y, because 7 and 8, 7 is normal, so 7 should be an N. So N should be inherited from 6 and another N from 5. So affected should have the normal allele, which is masked, and 6, it is normal, or affected, it is normal. So here it should be N small and small, since the allele of the normal is recessive. Here it's somehow confusing because you got used that the normal always is dominant. So here it's another case. 7 it's normal, so it's N small and small. 8 it is normal, so it's affected 8, but it gave birth to normal individual 12, so it should have A capital and small. Thank you.